Chapter 1. The Pink Slip and the Fateful Encounter. Mira Voss didn't wake up that morning expecting to lose her job. Save a dragon, or dodge gunfire from a corporate death squad, all before lunch. But then again, life at Orion 12 Intergalactic Medical Station had never been predictable. She'd spent 5 years patching up alien diplomats with too many limbs, soldiers who'd accidentally vaporized their own boots, and the occasional sentient blob that refused to stop oozing on her shoes. It was messy, thankless work, but it was hers, until it wasn't. The termination notice blinked on her wrist HUD as she scrubbed green slime off her gloves in the sterilization bay. Mira Voss. The message read in cold, pixelated text. You are hereby relieved of duty effective immediately. Reason: violation of Interspecies Protocol 47B. Excessive empathy toward non-priority patients. Excessive empathy. Mira snorted, tossing the slime-soaked rag into a bin. Tell that to the squid guy the first kept from choking on his own tentacles last week. She muttered. The station's AI didn't respond. It never did unless you begged it with the right keywords. And Mira wasn't in the mood to grovel. She packed her things in under 10 minutes, medkit, a spare visor, a half-eaten protein bar she'd been saving for a rainy day. The Orion 12 didn't care about rainy days, it floated in the vacuum of space, indifferent to weather or sentimentality. As she slung her bag over her shoulder, a memory flickered unbidden, her childhood home on Calyx-3. The smell of her mother's synth bread, the roar of NovaCore ships tearing through the sky before everything went up in flames. She'd been 10 when the corporation razed her colony for its mineral deposits. Excessive empathy hadn't saved her family then, and it hadn't saved her job now. Mira was halfway to the docking bay, plotting how to hitch a ride off this rust bucket, when she heard it, a low, guttural wheeze echoing from the scrap storage bay. She paused, frowning. The station was a maze of corridors and humming machinery. But that sound wasn't mechanical. It was alive, against her better judgment, and she had plenty of that going spare. She doubled back and peeped through the bay's grimy window. Inside, sprawled across a pile of discarded hull plating, was a creature straight out of a fever dream. It was a dragon, or at least, it looked like one. Scales shimmered a deep indigo under the flickering lights, cracked and leaking a faint, glowing fluid. Horns spiraled from its head, pulsing with dim energy, and its chest heaved irregularly, like a broken engine about to give out. Mira's first thought was, that's not in the medical manual. Her second was, I'm already fired. What's one more rule to break? She slipped inside, locking the door behind her. The dragon's golden eyes cracked open, tracking her as she approached. Okay, big guy, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking through her veins. Let's see if I can keep you from dying on my last day. She pulled her medkit from her bag and snapped on her diagnostic visor. The HUD flared to life, painting the creature's vitals in red: toxic shock, energy depletion, internal systems failing fast. Whatever it wasn't just organic, it was tech-enhanced. A hybrid of flesh and circuits. Mira worked quickly, hands steady from years of practice. She injected a broad-spectrum stabilizer into a vein beneath its scales, then patched a leaking wound with a nanogel seal. The dragon let out a shuddering breath, and then, to her shock, it spoke. Thank you, it rasped, its voice a strange blend of organic growl and synthetic echo. Mira froze, visor slipping slightly down her nose. You're welcome, she replied, more question than statement. Also, what the hell are you? Before it could answer, the bay doors hissed open with a clang. Mira spun around, heart lurching, as 3 figures stormed in, armored goons in sleek black suits, NovaCore logos gleaming on their chests. The leader, a wiry man with a scanner in hand, barked, "Step away from the asset. Civilian, that's corporate property." Mira's stomach sank. She knew that logo too well. The same one that had haunted her nightmares for 20 years. Asset? She shot back, stepping between them and the dragon. Looks more like a patient to me. And I don't see your medical license. Buddy. The leader's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, the dragon, still wobbly, pushed itself up, wings twitching. I am Zythera, it said, voice stronger now, and I am no one's property. The goons raised their rifles. But Mira didn't budge. Yeah, what Zythera said, she snapped. Also, I'm having a really bad day. So maybe don't test me. It was a bluff. She had no weapons beyond a scalpel and a bad attitude, but it bought her a second. That second was all someone else needed. A deafening boom rocked the bay as a section of the wall exploded inward. Dust and debris flew, and a lanky figure stumbled through the hole, coughing dramatically. Sorry I'm late, he yelled, waving a makeshift gadget that looked like a toaster strapped to a battery pack. Had to improvise. He hit a button, and a pulse of static fried the goons' comms, sending them scrambling. Mira blinked at the newcomer, wild hair, grease-stained coveralls, and a grin that screamed trouble. Who are you? She demanded. Kael Drumm. At your service, he said, bowing with mock flair. Ex-NovaCore techie, current fugitive, saw these clowns tracking your dragon and figured you could use a hand. Or, an explosion. The goons recovered, shouting orders, but Kael was already moving. Time to go, he yelled, dragging Mira toward a rickety transport shuttle parked in the corner. Zythera limped after them, wings scraping the floor. Mira hesitated, then grabbed her bag and ran. I hate my life, she muttered as she climbed aboard. The shuttle roared to life, barely, and Kael punched the controls, launching them out of Orion 12 just as NovaCore's rifles started firing. Sparks flew off the hull, and Mira gripped the seat, glaring at Kael. Where are we going? She shouted over the noise. Vathor 9, he yelled back. Deserted rock. No one'll look for us there. Zythera, crammed in the back, rumbled. I hope you are correct. Mira slumped in her seat, staring at the stars streaking past. Fired, chased, and now stuck with a fugitive and a talking dragon. Fantastic, she said to no one in particular. Best career move ever. Chapter 2. The Secret of Zythera. The shuttle rattled like a tin can in a storm as it broke through Vathor 9's thin, dusty atmosphere. Mira Voss clung to her seat, knuckles white, while Kael Drumm whooped like a kid on a roller coaster. She's holding together, he shouted, slapping the dashboard as if that would keep the engines from coughing their last breath. Zythera, wedged in the cargo hold, let out a low groan that sounded suspiciously like a complaint. Mira shot Kael a glare. If we crash, I'm haunting you first, she said. He grinned back, undeterred. Noted. Miraculously, they didn't crash. The shuttle skidded to a stop on a cracked plain of reddish dirt, kicking up a cloud of dust that coated everything in sight. Mira coughed as she kicked the hatch open, stepping out into the desolate landscape of Vathor 9. The air was dry and stale, the ground littered with rusted machinery and skeletal frames of abandoned mining rigs. In the distance, jagged cliffs loomed under a sky the color of burnt amber. Home sweet home, Kael said, hopping out beside her, his boots crunching on gravel. No one's been here since NovaCore sucked it dry decades ago. Mira adjusted her bag, eyeing him warily. And you're sure they won't follow us? She asked. Kael shrugged, pulling a gadget from his pocket, a mess of wires and blinking lights. Scramblers still running. Gives us a head start. Maybe. She didn't like the maybe. But before she could press him, Zythera lumbered out of the shuttle, wings scraping the hull. Its scales shimmered faintly in the dim light, and Mira noticed the glow was steadier now, thanks to her quick patch job. You okay, big guy? She asked, softer than she meant to. Zythera's golden eyes met hers. I am functional, it said, voice a deep hum that vibrated through the ground. Thanks to you. Mira waved it off, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. I'm not running a charity. Kael snorted. Could have fooled me. Who drags a dragon onto a junker shuttle just to play hero? Mira rounded on him. And who blows up a wall to save strangers? What's your deal, hotshot? Kael's grin faltered. Just for a second. He rubbed the back of his neck, smearing grease across his skin. Let's just say I've got history with NovaCore. Used to fix their toys, ships, drones, the works. Then I saw what they did to the stuff they couldn't control. He glanced at Zythera. Like him. Quit the gig. Stole some tech. Been on the run ever since. Mira raised an eyebrow. So you're a thief with a conscience. Great. We're a real dream team. Before Kael could retort, Zythera shifted, its tail kicking up a puff of dust. I am not what you think, it said, cutting through their bickering. Mira and Kael turned to it, startled. Okay, Mira said slowly. Then what are you? Because NovaCore doesn't send goons for just any old lizard. Zythera's eyes glowed brighter, and it straightened, towering over them despite its injuries. I am Zythera, keeper of the ether. I was forged by the Valtheri, a civilization lost to time. Not as a weapon but as a key. Mira blinked. A key to what? Zythera's wings twitched. To rebirth. Within me lies the ether crystal, a source of limitless energy. It was designed to power a machine that could restore worlds like this one, bring life where there is none. Kael's jaw dropped, his techie brain clearly sparking. Wait, you're saying you've got a planet-fixing battery in your guts? And NovaCore wants it? Zythera nodded. They see only power to exploit. They do not understand its purpose. Mira crossed her arms, skeptical. So you're some ancient eco-dragon? That's a nice story, but I've seen NovaCore's handiwork. They don't care about restoring anything. They'd strip you for parts and call it a profit. Zythera's gaze didn't waver, which is why I fled. And why I need your help. Mira laughed, short and sharp. Help? I'm unemployed, not a miracle worker. What am I supposed to do? Kael, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with excitement. If there's a machine out there that can use that crystal, we've got to find it. Think about it. Turn this dust ball into a paradise? That'd stick it to NovaCore and make us legends. Mira groaned. You're insane, and I'm not here to play galactic gardener. Their argument was cut short by a distant rumble. Mira's head snapped up as a sleek NovaCore scout ship sliced through the sky, its engines screaming. Kael, she said, voice tight, your scrambler sucks. He fumbled with the gadget, cursing as it sparked in his hands. It's fine, mostly. We just need cover. The ship fired, a plasma bolt scorching the ground 20 meters away. Mira grabbed Zythera's arm, warm and scaly, and yanked. Move. They sprinted toward a jagged cliff face, dodging blasts that kicked up fountains of dirt. Zythera stumbled, still weak, but Mira and Kael hauled it along until they reached a narrow crevice. They squeezed inside just as the scout ship circled overhead, its searchlights sweeping the ground. The cave was dark and damp, a stark contrast to the arid surface. Mira caught her breath, leaning against the wall, while Kael peeped out. They'll land soon, he whispered. We're not out of this yet. Zythera's voice rumbled through the gloom. There is more here than you know. Mira turned, squinting as her visor adjusted to the low light. The walls weren't just rock. They were carved with faint, swirling patterns, depictions of dragons like Zythera soaring over lush forests. What the? She muttered. Kael ran a hand over the etchings, eyes wide. This is Valtheri. It's gotta be. We're standing in their ruins. Before Mira could process that, the cave shook, a deep, bone-rattling tremor. Outside, the scout ship's engines roared closer, joined by the whine of landing gear. Zythera's wings flared slightly. They will not stop, it said. Not until they have me. Mira clenched her fists, the old anger bubbling up, the same anger she'd felt watching NovaCore destroy her home. Then they're gonna have to go through me, she said, surprising even herself. Kael grinned, pulling a tiny explosive from his pocket. And me, let's give him a welcome party. Mira shook her head, but a smirk tugged at her lips. Fine, but if we die, I'm still haunting you. The cave trembled again as boots hit the ground outside. They were out of time, and Mira was out of patience. Chapter 3. Reluctant Allies. The cave was a claustrophobic mess of shadows and damp stone, but it beat getting fried by NovaCore's plasma bolts. Mira Voss crouched near the entrance, visor flickering as she scanned the scout ship hovering outside. Its searchlights danced across the cliff face, close enough to make her stomach twist. Beside her, Kael Drumm hunched over Zythera, muttering to himself as he poked at the dragon's damaged wing with a tool that looked like a screwdriver crossed with a glowstick. Hold still, big guy, he said. This circuitry's a mess. Who built you, anyway? A toddler with a welding torch? Zythera rumbled, its golden eyes narrowed. The Valtheri were artisans, not amateurs. Kael snorted. Artisans who didn't plan for crash landings. Apparently, Mira shot him a look. Can you focus? We've got a ship full of corporate psychos out there. And you're fixing sounds like a cat choking on a hairball. Kael waved her off, grinning. Relax. I once patched a fusion reactor with rubber bands in spite. This is child's play. Mira rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She had to admit, Kael's chaotic energy was growing on her, like a fungus. Maybe, but still useful. She turned to Zythera, who was studying the carvings on the cave walls with an intensity that made her uneasy. You said there's more here, she prompted. Care to elaborate before we're all barbecue? Zythera's tail twitched, brushing against the stone. This is a sanctuary, it said, a place of the Valtheri. The machine I spoke of, it is near. Machine? Kael perked up, nearly dropping his tool. The planet-fixing one? Where? Zythera inclined its head toward the back of the cave, where the shadows deepened into a tunnel. Follow me. Mira hesitated. If this is a trap, I'm feeding you to Kael's next explosion, she muttered, but she grabbed her medkit and followed, Kael trailing behind with a bounce in his step. The tunnel twisted downward, the air growing cooler and heavier. Mira's visor picked up faint energy signatures, old, dormant, but alive. The walls widened into a cavern, and she stopped dead, breath-catching. Before them loomed a structure unlike anything she'd ever seen, a towering lattice of metal and crystal, pulsing with a weak, greenish glow. Tubes and conduits snaked across its surface, half buried in dust, and at its center hung a hollow slot shaped eerily like Zythera's chest. Holy stars, Kael whispered, eyes wide. That's it, isn't it? Zythera nodded. The reclaimer. It can restore VALTHOR9. But it requires the ether crystal. Mira frowned, piecing it together. The thing inside you. Zythera dipped its head. Yes, but to activate it, I must surrender my essence. Kael's excitement faltered. Wait, surrender? As in, you'd shut down? Die? Zythera's gaze was steady. Not death, transformation. I would become part of the reclaimer's cycle. No way, Mira snapped, stepping forward. I didn't drag you across space just to turn you into a glorified battery. There's got to be another option. Kael scratched his head, studying the machine. She's got a point. This tech's ancient. Maybe I can rig it to run without frying you. Gimme a day, some wire, and a lot of luck. Zythera tilted its head. You would risk this for me? Kael shrugged. I'm already a wanted man. What's one more bad idea? Mira smirked despite herself. You're both insane. But fine. Let's. Her words cut off as the cavern shook. Dust raining from the ceiling. A muffled boom echoed from above, followed by shouts and the whine of drills. They're here, Kael said, voice tight. He pulled a small explosive from his pocket, barely the size of a coin. I've got one left. Better make it count. Mira grabbed her scalpel, useless as it was against armor, and nodded. Zythera, any tricks up your scales? The dragon flexed its wings, energy crackling along its horns. I am not defenseless. The tunnel lit up as 3 NovaCore soldiers burst in, rifles raised. Surrender the asset, one barked, voice distorted by a helmet mic. Mira didn't waste time talking. She dove behind a stalagmite as Kael lobbed his explosive. It hit the ground with a pathetic pop, releasing a cloud of smoke instead of a blast. Seriously? She yelled. Kael coughed, waving a hand. It's a smokescreen. Improvise. The soldiers fired blindly, plasma sizzling through the haze. Zythera roared, a sound that rattled Mira's bones, and charged, slamming one soldier into the wall with its tail. Mira darted out, tackling another's legs. He stumbled, and she drove her scalpel into a gap in his armor, aiming for a nerve cluster. He yelped and dropped, clutching his thigh. Kael, meanwhile, wrestled the third, jamming his glowstick tool into the soldier's helmet until it shorted out with a shower of sparks. The smoke cleared, leaving 3 groaning bodies on the floor. Mira panted, wiping sweat from her brow. Nice teamwork, she said, half sarcastic. Kael grinned, retrieving his tool. Told you I'm handy. Zythera loomed over them, unscathed but breathing hard. They will send more, it warned. Mira nodded, glancing at the reclaimer. Then we'd better figure this out fast. I'm not losing you to NovaCore, or to that thing. Kael knelt by the machine, prying open a panel. Okay, crystal-powered doomsday device. Let's see what you're hiding. Mira watched him work, then turned to Zythera. Why do you trust us? She asked quietly. Zythera's eyes softened. You saved me when you had no reason to. That is not a choice machines understand. Mira swallowed, the weight of that sinking in. She'd saved plenty of patience. But this felt different, personal. The cavern rumbled again, louder this time. Kael cursed, pulling back from the machine. Bad news. Whatever I just touched. It's waking up. Good news? I think we can tweak it. Maybe. Mira glared at him. Maybe's not good enough. Before he could argue, a new sound cut through the air, the roar of engines. Heavier than the scout ship. That's a dropship, Kael said, paling. They're not messing around anymore. Mira clenched her fists, the old anger flaring. NovaCore had taken her home. Her job, and now they wanted Zythera. Then neither are we, she said. She looked at Kael and Zythera. A plan forming. We're not running. We're fighting. Agreed? Kael nodded, a wild grin spreading. Oh, I'm in. Zythera's wings flared. As am I. The dropship's shadow darkened the cave entrance. Mira took a deep breath, steeling herself. Let's give him hell. Chapter 4. The Battle of Valthor 9. The dropship hit the ground with a bone-shaking thud, its engines screaming as it disgorged a squad of NovaCore soldiers onto Valthor 9's dusty surface. Mira Voss peered out from the cave entrance, her visor flickering with heat signatures, too many to count. She tightened her grip on the scalpel, its blade laughably small against the rifles and drones spilling out of the ship. Well, she muttered, at least I'll go down swinging. Beside her, Kael Drumm rigged a tangle of wires to his last gadget, a dented box he swore was a disruptor. Zythera crouched low, wings twitching, its scales glowing brighter with every passing second. The air crackled as a figure stepped from the dropship's ramp, clad in sleek armor with a cape that billowed dramatically despite the still air. Mira's stomach twisted as she recognized the insignia, a silver starburst. The mark of a NovaCore commander. The woman removed her helmet, revealing sharp features and a smirk that screamed arrogance. I'm Commander Vara, she called, her voice amplified by a comm unit. Surrender the asset, and I might let you die quickly. Mira's blood ran cold. That voice, it wasn't just corporate venom. It was personal. She flashed back to Calyx-3, the day NovaCore raised her colony. A younger Vara had been there, barking orders as flames swallowed Mira's home. You, Mira growled, stepping forward despite Kael's hissed protest. I know you. Vara's smirk widened. Oh, a fan? I'm flattered. Now hand over the dragon, or I'll bury you with it. Kael tugged Mira's arm. Maybe don't taunt the lady with the army? Mira shook him off, fury overriding sense. She's not getting Zythera, not after what she did. Zythera rumbled, sensing her anger. I will fight with you, it said, voice steady. Kael sighed, hefting his disruptor. Guess we're doing this the hard way. Plan? Mira scanned the terrain, crumbling ruins, rusted hulks of old mining rigs. Ambush, she said, hit them fast, use the cover. Zythera, you're the heavy hitter. Kael, make that thing work or we're toast. Kael saluted with mock seriousness. Aye, Captain. Zythera's wings flared, energy crackling. Understood. They split up, Mira darting behind a toppled crane while Kael rigged his disruptor to a power cell scavenged from the cave. Zythera took flight, a blur of indigo scales against the amber sky, drawing the soldiers' attention. Vara shouted orders, and rifles opened fire, plasma bolts searing the air. Zythera dodged with surprising agility, then dug, slamming into a drone and sending it crashing in a shower of sparks. Mira seized the chaos, sprinting to a cluster of soldiers distracted by Zythera. She slid under a rig, slashing a soldier's ankle with her scalpel, a dirty move, but effective. He screamed and fell, and she grabbed his rifle, firing wildly at the others. She wasn't a soldier, but desperation made a decent teacher. Across the field, Kael's disruptor whined to life, emitting a pulse that fried half the drone's circuits. Take that, you overpriced tin cans, he yelled, ducking as a bolt singed his hair. For a moment, they held their own. Zythera roared, scattering troops with a blast of energy from its horns. Mira's stolen rifle clicked empty, but she bashed a soldier with the stock, adrenaline pumping. Kael lobbed a chunk of scrap metal, knocking another out cold, but Vara wasn't playing. She raised a wrist device, and the dropship's cannons swiveled, locking onto Zythera. A beam of white-hot plasma grazed the dragon's wing, sending it spiraling to the ground with a pained screech. Zythera, Mira shouted, racing toward it. She slid to her knees beside the dragon, hands shaking as she checked its wound, charred scales. But no fatal damage, yet. Zythera groaned. I can still fight. Mira glared at the advancing soldiers. Not if I can help it. But the odds were shifting. Vara strode forward, flanked by reinforcements, her cape snapping in the wind. Enough games, she snarled. Take them. A soldier grabbed Kael, pinning his arms as he thrashed. Let me go, you shiny-booted thug, he yelled. Vara ignored him, locking eyes with Mira. The asset, now, or your friend's brains decorate the dirt. Mira froze, rifle slipping from her hands. She'd lost too much to NovaCore already, her family, her home. She couldn't lose Kael too. Or Zythera. Don't do it, Kael rasped, but his bravado was thin. Zythera pushed itself up, wings trembling. Mira, it said softly, I will go. To save him. Mira's chest tightened. No, she snapped. You're not a bargaining chip. But Vara's patience ran out. She nodded, and the soldier raised his rifle to Kael's head. Mira acted on instinct. She charged, tackling Vara with a scream of rage. They hit the ground hard, Mira's fists flying. But Vara was stronger, trained. She flipped Mira over, pinning her with a knee to the chest. Pathetic, Vara sneered, drawing a blade. Before she could strike, Zythera lunged, knocking Vara off Mira with a swipe of its tail. The commander rolled, cursing, as Zythera stood over Mira, panting. Run, it urged, but there was nowhere to go. Soldiers closed in, rifles trained. Kael broke free, scrambling to Mira's side, but they were surrounded. Vara rose, brushing dust off her armor. Last chance, she said, aiming her wrist device at Zythera. Surrender, or I take the crystal from your corpse. Mira's mind raced. The reclaimer. It was their only shot. She met Zythera's eyes, a silent question passing between them. The dragon nodded. We must activate it, it said. Now. Mira grabbed Kael's arm. Back to the cave. Move, Zythera roared, unleashing a burst of energy that staggered the soldiers. Buying them seconds, they ran, dodging fire, the dropship's cannons powering up behind them. Mira's lungs burned as they reached the cavern, the reclaimer's glow flickering like a beacon. Kael, she gasped, tell me you can make this work. Kael stared at the machine, then at Zythera's weakening form. Yeah, maybe. Mira shoved him toward it. No maybes. Do it. Vara's voice echoed from outside, cold and triumphant. You can't hide forever. The ground shook as the dropship advanced. Mira clenched her fists, staring at the reclaimer. They were out of time, and out of options. Chapter 5. Starting the machine. The cavern trembled as the dropship's cannons hammered the cliff above, raining dust and jagged stone onto the reclaimer. Mira Voss knelt beside Zythera, her hands pressed against its scorched wing, the heat seeping through her gloves. Hang in there, she whispered, voice cracking. She'd patched worse wounds in worse conditions. But this felt different. Zythera wasn't just a patient. It was a friend, and she'd dragged it into this mess. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. Zythera's golden eyes flickered, soft despite the pain. You gave me purpose, it rasped. That is enough. Kael Drumm scrambled at the reclaimer's base, his hands a blur of grease and wire as he yanked panels open. Come on, you ancient pile of junk, he muttered, jamming a tool into a slot. Sparks flew, and the machine's glow pulsed erratically, casting eerie shadows across the cavern. Mira, I need Zythera's crystal, now. Mira's head snapped up. No way, you said we could do this without killing him. Kael didn't look at her, his voice tight. I'm trying, but we're out of time. That ship's gonna bury us. Outside, Commander Vara's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and venomous. Tear it down, I want that crystal. The ground shook harder as plasma bolts chewed through the rock. the cavern's entrance collapsing in a roar of rubble. Mira shielded Zythera with her body, coughing as dust filled her lungs. "Kael, do something," she yelled. He cursed, ripping out a conduit and splicing it with a cable from his pack. "Hold your horses, I'm rewriting history here." Zythera pushed itself up, trembling but resolute. "Mira," it said, "place me in the machine." She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "No, we'll find another way." But Zythera's tail nudged her gently toward the reclaimer's central slot. "There is no other way. Not now." Kael finally looked up, his face pale. "He's right. The crystal's the key, it's coded to this thing. But I think I can keep him alive." Sort of? Mira snapped, grabbing his collar. "That's not good enough." Kael pried her hands off. Desperate. "Look, the reclaimer's got a feedback loop. If I reroute it, the crystal powers the machine without fully draining him. He'll be weak, maybe lose his fancy glow. But he won't die, I hope." Mira stared at him, then at Zythera. "You hope?" Zythera rumbled, almost a laugh. "I trust him. And you." The cavern groaned, a massive crack splitting the ceiling. Mira's heart pounded, torn between fear and fury. She'd lost too much to NovaCore, her family, her home. She couldn't lose Zythera too. But Vara's troops were closing in, their boots crunching through the debris. "Fine," she said, voice breaking. "But if this goes wrong?" "Kael, I'm breaking your nose." He nodded. "Grim. Fair." Together, they lifted Zythera, its weight staggering despite its injuries. The dragon settled into the reclaimer's slot, scales clicking against crystal. Kael slammed a lever, and the machine whirred to life. Green light flooding the cavern. Zythera shuddered, energy arcing from its chest as the ether crystal flared, a brilliant orb of blue-white fire. "Now," Kael shouted, twisting a dial. The light surged, and a shockwave erupted, knocking Mira and Kael back. Outside, the ground quaked. Mira scrambled to the entrance, peering through the dust. The reclaimer's energy pulsed outward, a shimmering wave that swept across Fatethor 9. Where it touched, the barren soil cracked open, green shoots bursting forth, vines, grass, trees unfurling at impossible speed. The dropship's systems flickered, then died, its cannons falling silent as the wave shorted out its circuits. Soldiers shouted, retreating as roots coiled around their boots. Vara, caught mid-stride, spun toward the cave, her face twisted with rage. "No," she screamed, charging through the sprouting chaos. Mira stepped out, fists clenched, the stolen rifle lost but her resolve intact. "You're done," she said, voice steady. Vara laughed, drawing her blade. "You think a few weeds stop me?" She lunged, faster than Mira expected, the blade slashing toward her throat. Mira ducked, years of dodging panicked patience kicking in. She grabbed Vara's arm, twisting it with a move she'd learned in medbay brawls, then slammed her knee into the commander's gut. Vara gasped, stumbling, but swung again. Mira caught the blow on her forearm, pain searing through her, and tackled Vara to the ground. They rolled, dirt and new grass staining their clothes, until Mira pinned her, driving a fist into Vara's jaw. "That's for Calyx3. She snarled, hitting her again. "And that's for Zythera." Vara went limp, dazed, as the reclaimer's hum peaked behind them. Mira staggered back, breathing hard, and turned to the cave. The machine glowed blindingly now, Zythera's form blurring within it. "Kael," she yelled, running inside. He was hunched over the controls, sweat dripping. "It's working, look." He pointed outside, where Fatethor 9 transformed, rivers carved through the dust. Trees towered, the sky clearing to a soft blue. But Zythera was fading, its scales dimmed, its wings sagged, the crystal's light draining into the reclaimer. "Stop it," Mira cried, grabbing Kael. He shook his head, frantic. "I can't, it's locked in." Zythera's voice, faint now, echoed through the cavern. "Let me finish this. It is my purpose." Mira pounded the machine, tears streaming. "Your purpose isn't to die for us." The light flared one last time, blinding, and silence fell. The reclaimer powered down, its glow fading to a flicker. Zythera slumped in the slot, motionless, its scales dull. Mira sank to her knees, a sob choking her. No. Kael put a hand on her shoulder. Quiet for once. Outside, the dropship's crew fled, abandoning Vara as their ship sputtered uselessly. Fatethor 9 was alive, lush, vibrant, but the cost felt too high. Mira reached for Zythera, her hand trembling. You stupid dragon, she whispered. You didn't have to do this. The cavern was still, the air thick with the scent of new growth. NovaCore was beaten, but victory tasted like ash. Chapter 6. The New Guardian. The air on Fatethor 9 smelled of damp earth and blooming flowers. A stark contrast to the dust-choked wasteland it had been hours ago. Mira Voss stood amidst a newborn forest, the reclaimer's silence ringing in her ears. Trees stretched skyward, their leaves shimmering in a breeze that hadn't existed yesterday. Rivers gurgled nearby, carving paths through soil that had been barren for decades. It was a miracle, a damn beautiful one, but Mira couldn't shake the weight in her chest. Zythera was gone, and no amount of greenery could fill that hole. Kael Drumm sat on a mossy rock beside her, fiddling with a broken piece of his disruptor. For once, he wasn't talking. A rare event Mira might have celebrated if she weren't so numb. She stared at the cave entrance, half buried now under vines, where the reclaimer stood dormant. We did it, she said finally, her voice hoarse. NovaCore's gone. Fatethor 9's alive. Kael nodded, not looking up. Yeah, big win. His tone was flat, and she knew he felt it too. The victory was hollow without Zythera. Mira kicked a pebble, watching it skitter into the grass. I should have stopped it, she muttered. Found another way. Kael sighed, tossing the disruptor aside. You heard him, Mira. It was his choice. Doesn't make it suck less. Though, she glared at him, but there was no heat in it. He was right, and she hated that most of all. They dragged Commander Vara, bruised and unconscious, onto the dropship before the last of her crew fled. Their tech fried by the reclaimer's pulse. NovaCore wouldn't be back anytime soon. Not with their prize lost and Fatethor 9 transformed into something they couldn't exploit. Mira should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt tired. She sank onto the grass, staring at the sky, blue now, streaked with soft clouds. What do we do now? She asked, more to herself than Kael. He shrugged, leaning back. Dunno. Find a bar? Get drunk? Seems like a solid plan after saving a planet. Mira snorted, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. You'd blow up the bar before we finished the first round. Kael grinned, the first real spark of his usual chaos returning. Only if they watered down the booze. She shook her head, almost laughing, and for a moment, the weight lifted. Then the ground trembled, not the violent quake of battle, but a gentle pulse, like a heartbeat. Mira froze, her hand dropping to the grass. You feel that? Kael sat up, frowning. Yeah, what the? A glow erupted from the cave, soft at first, then blinding. Mira shielded her eyes, heart racing, as a shape emerged from the light. It was smaller than before, wings compact, scales a muted indigo, but unmistakable. Zythera? She whispered, scrambling to her feet. The dragon stepped forward, its movements slow but steady. Its golden eyes were dimmer, softer, and the ether crystal's glow was gone from its chest. Mira, it said, voice quieter now, less synthetic. Kael. Mira ran to it, stopping short, afraid to believe. You're alive? How? Zythera tilted its head, a faint shimmer rippling across its scales. The reclaimer, it did not destroy me. It remade me. I am no longer the keeper of the ether. But I am still here. Kael whooped, punching the air. I knew it. Feedback loop worked. Take that, ancient tech. Mira ignored him, reaching out to touch Zythera's snout. It was warm. Real. You idiot, she said, tears welling up. Don't ever scare me like that again. Zythera rumbled, almost a laugh. I will try not to. She hugged it, awkwardly, given its size, and didn't care how ridiculous she looked. Kael wandered over, inspecting Zythera like a mechanic with a new toy. No crystal, huh? Guess you're just a regular dragon now. Zythera's wings flared slightly. Not regular. I am bound to this world. Its guardian. The reclaimer gave me new purpose. Mira pulled back, wiping her eyes. Guardian? So you're staying? Zythera nodded. Valthor 9 lives because of us. I will protect it. Mira glanced around at the forest. The rivers. The life they'd brought back. She'd lost her old life, her job, her routine, but this felt bigger. Then I'm staying too, she said, surprising herself. Someone's got to keep this place running. Maybe build a med station. Help whoever comes through. Kael raised an eyebrow. You? Settling down? Thought you'd be itching to run. She smirked. I'm done running. Besides, someone's got to keep you from blowing up my new home. Kael laughed, clapping her shoulder. Fair, I'm in. Then, gotta fix this planet up proper, maybe rig some defenses. Keep NovaCore out for good. Zythera's eyes gleamed. A worthy task. I approve. The trio stood there, the forest humming around them. And Mira felt something shift, grief giving way to hope. She'd turned her pain into something tangible. A legacy born from loss. Okay, she said, stretching. First things first, Zythera. You're on patrol. Kael, no explosions until I say so. And me? I'm finding a spot for that med station. Kael grinned, already pulling tools from his pack. Bossy already. I like it. Zythera took flight, smaller wings beating strong, circling above the trees. Mira watched it go, then turned to the horizon. The sky was clear, the future uncertain but hers to shape. Not the worst day after all, she murmured, smiling, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over Valthor 9. Mira started walking, Kael at her side and Zythera soaring overhead. They'd fought, lost, and won, and now they'd build. The wanderer nurse, the fugitive techie, and the dragon guardian had found a home. For once, the stars felt like they were on their side. Video description, 150 words. Join Mira Voss, a fired nurse with a grudge, as she teams up with fugitive techie Kael Drumm and a mysterious dragon. Zythera. In this thrilling sci-fi adventure. After saving Zythera from NovaCore's clutches, the trio crash lands on the desolate Valthor 9. Uncovering an ancient machine that could resurrect the planet. Battling ruthless Commander Vara and her corporate army. Mira confronts her tragic past while Kael rigs gadgets and Zythera risks everything. As the Reclaimer awakens, transforming the wasteland into a lush paradise. Sacrifices are made, but hope endures. Will they defeat NovaCore and forge a new future? Packed with action, humor, and heart, this tale of redemption and rebirth will keep you hooked. Watch now to see how a nurse, a techie, and a dragon rewrite the stars.